Welcome to the Coastal Athlete Program, presented by Apex Predator Athletics. Train today, survive tomorrow. Now, live from the shores of Monterey Bay, here's your host, Shep.
Welcome to the Coastal Athlete Program. I am your host, Shep. Today, I am joined... Fuck.
I love that. That's great. Just keep the consistency. Just like my background.
All right. We'll try that one more time.
There's a clip for you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I was just...
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the...
Capcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Capcast, Episode 2. Today is the 29th of May, 2020, and this is your up-to-the-date news from around the surfing world. Today, with surfing news, we have Joe getting us started. I don't know if I like that either. What do you guys think about that? Was that too weird? Joe? It's like the one
I think it's too weird. It flowed right in. I mean, it's probably weird for you to say that, but I don't think it was weird for a Capcast to sound like that or flow like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And then I'll just lead right into your segment.
Yep. Do you want to start with wavelengths?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm going to clap on my end so that we have an easy spike. Welcome to episode 2 of Capcast. Today is the 29th of May, 2020. Here is your up-to-the-date news from around the sports, surfing, media, music, you name it, news. First up, Joe with what's going on in the surf line.
Oh, there's a lot of things going on in the surf lineup. Big notable ones is summer season is upon us here, so I'm always a big advocate with the Coastal Athlete Program to swim near lifeguards, be in guarded and protected areas, be smart about where you're going out in the ocean. And the big thing that I have actually a lot of press about, and I've really been excited about that, they're starting to put this out there, is about rip currents and getting pulled out in rip currents, getting caught in rip currents, kind of how to identify them, what they look like on shore from above, how to keep yourself safe in them. So I don't know, Danny, do you know much about rip tides or rip currents at all?
You know what? When I was a child, I got caught in one, and a lifeguard reamed me real good for it. So I know, it scarred me. So I'm afraid of them now. That's all I know.
Oh, that kind of explains your ocean experience to me, though, in a way.
I've had plenty of scarring ocean endeavors.
Oh, you've had.
Were you at the House of Man when you got reamed?
No, I was much younger than that. There was much of drunken swimming though in the ocean at House of Man, which never ends up well.
Well, I was gonna say that's a great spot to go swimming drunken in the middle of the night as I'm shaking my head. If you can watch me on YouTube. So Shep, what do you know about rip currents, or is it rip current or is it rip tide?
I'm glad you asked, Joe. So the biggest difference between a rip current and a rip tide is that a rip current is generated by focused wave action or wave action creeping along a beach, whereas rip tide is generated by the flooding or draining of a coastal waterway or area. So, for example, a rip tide is like a steady, constant thing that will basically, it's a repeating process, right? Because all the water that is upstream is now being pushed back out into the ocean, that brackish water. Whereas a riptide could form in something as small as along a 15-foot stretch of beach, or it could be as long as, a 500-foot stretch of beach. So it's a little bit more variable and intermittent.
Okay. So what I hear with the rip tide is it's tide based. So I think about the San Francisco Bay and how you have the ebbing and flowing tides and how those have very strong pulls when they're doing that, as opposed to beach contours causing rip currents. And that's not dependent on the tide. That can happen at any tide.
Well, it's not beach contours. It's wave action relative to the beach. So waves that crash directly on the beach won't necessarily generate a riptide, but waves that arrive angrily on a beach will generate a riptide consistently.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that little bit. Specifically, if you're looking for more info about visuals on it, LA County lifeguards LACO lifeguards on Instagram. They actually have a 4 or 5 page little thing on their feed that talks about recurrence, and it also shows some really good visuals of it. I don't remember who reposted it because I couldn't figure that out. And then I believe, was it Shep, you were telling me that Wavelengths had an article the other day, and I think I saw it, but I think you might.
Yeah, the article was by Luke. Yeah, Luke Gartside wrote it, and it's about the findings of an associate professor from the Naval Postgraduate School, who we have reached out to and asked to come on the podcast to talk about the findings that they've published. The title is a little clickbaity. Everything you know about how to survive a RIP could be wrong. What the article is basically saying is that what we teach people in general, the keep it simple, stupid method is that you swim parallel to the beach until you swim out of the riptide, after which point you can make your way back in. Now, what they did was they used ink tests, they did all types of different trace tests, and they found out that some riptides actually form almost a figure 8 pattern. They recycle into themselves. And so what they advocate for is not investing energy, going with the riptide, and then trying to swim once it's kicked you out. So I don't want to, without talking to the person who published this, I don't want to come out too strong here. But what I will say is that when it comes to teaching water survival and what Coastal Athlete Program has taught since its founding, and that we will teach until the day that they shut us down, is that it is better to be an active participant in the scenario than a passive victim. So if you are in a riptide, it makes more sense to swim with the tide, right? You walk with the escalator than it does to relax and wait for it to potentially pull you into an even worse situation. If you generate momentum by swimming with the tide, you can actually get enough speed to potentially break free of it a lot sooner. So again, haven't read the study in depth. I'm reading another person's interpretation of that study. So until we get a chance to talk to the authors themselves, I don't want to get too far into it. But I think it's potentially very dangerous at the beginning of a summer season in which people haven't necessarily been active and have found themselves in a quarantine scenario to be advocating for passively going with the riptide. Like that means you're going to be in the water longer, which increases the probability that you'll be exposed to hypothermia. It increases the probability that you'll be put further away from shore than you're capable of swimming on your own. At least by staying active in the process, you have that psychological hope, and you're not just watching the shore get further and further away or behind more and more rollers. Joe, what do you think? I mean, you work with a ton of people that are susceptible to rips in a different way, working with people who have lower limb amputations or any amputation whatsoever. They're compromised in their ability to resist that natural force. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's interesting that, so with the adaptive athletes, I teach them the Coastal Athlete way, and that's either you swim parallel to shore and you get yourself out of the rip. Lately, I've been almost teaching them a different way, and that is to follow the rip tides out, or the rip currents out, and to look for the rip currents. The reason why I'm actually teaching that is for competitive reasons. I want my surfers to know where the rips are, to take advantage of them, to help them get out the back faster, more easily, with less energy and less taxing on me as well. I think it is interesting that the article brought up being a passive victim, but talked about figure 8 rip currents, because I know 2 spots that I see that regularly. Churches is one of them on the inside between that and Sano. That pops up there. And Golden West, I imagine you've seen that rip at Golden West at the Cliff Chef.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think I'm with you. I'm not going to say the study is wrong. I'm not going to say the authors are wrong. I would just like to hear more of the thought process behind it so I can understand it better before I give judgment onto them. But I'm just going to keep teaching the way I teach, I guess.
Yeah, in the early days of CAP, down in South Monterey Bay, when we were working with the dive school guys, we taught them that you actually made your entries into the water, because Monterey Bay has, at least the south part, has a section where it's just long, mile-long clear outs. And it's basically just a beat down to get outside the surf zone. So we would teach the guys, you swim with the rip so that you can swim twice as fast. So you spend less time exposed to potentially getting a concussion, trying to move through this very volatile, very shallow, very flat bottom zone. If you're talking about like, and this is where the difference between a qualified swimmer and the type of person who most likely will be exposed to a riptide without realizing it, that's your intermediate to beginning swimmer. Yeah, I get super nervous about the idea of saying, you know, just cross your feet and hope that you don't have a wave land on your face that potentially knocks you out.
I do too, because I think of the panic factor of even if a kid knows to just ride the rip out. If I was 10 years old on my boogie board getting pulled out, no matter what I would be told, I would still try to fight in. And even if I was doing I was told, as in riding it out and letting it pull me out, that would probably be really, especially when I'm just sitting there either on a board or sitting in the water. And yeah, I would be wondering, am I going to get smoked by a wave? Is something else going to come out of the water? What am I exposing myself to? And to me, the mental aspect of me thinking, okay, I'm going to swim out of this thing and I'm going to swim away from shore, to me is more comforting. Now, I'm a very experienced water and ocean person compared to the average or beginner swimmer that's in the ocean. So it's going to be interesting, and I would like to hear more just so I can maybe adapt it or possibly change the perspective or the way I approach with beginner or more intermediate swimmers that may not have as much ocean experience. So have you guys been watching the surf cams up in Santa Cruz or seen any clips about any surf cams up in Santa Cruz recently?
Well, I don't know if you guys have seen, but we've had quite a few landlord spottings recently in the Santa Cruz area, and we had our first air jaws out at Pleasure Point a couple of days ago.
I saw that. The man in the gray suit came out and did a little show for the camera. I've been hearing that too, that I think I even I read the article somewhere that a local helicopter guide that does, I guess, flights around the Monterey Bay somewhere, he has been noticing that there's a increased shark presence this year. He didn't say it was due to the world affairs going on and what's happening in the world. He's like, it's just this year for some reason, there's just been more sharks. Same amount of people, but more sharks for some reason. So yeah, it's been interesting. What do you guys think about that? You know, seeing sharks breach outside the kelp zones and being told there are probably white sharks inside the kelp zones. We just never have caught them.
I'm cool off going out there, honestly. I know that there's like a statistic of getting eaten or getting killed by a shark, but I'm like, I think I've mentioned it before. Like, I feel a piece of seaweed brush against me. I'm like, oh, sea monster. You know what I mean? Like, I'm good. I'll wait until this group of white sharks kind of dissipates a little bit.
So
I think
Danny,
you got your wife to laugh pretty hard at that one, Danny. Or girlfriend, I'm sorry.
Girlfriend, yeah.
So I don't remember what I was going to say now. Squirrel, shiny objects. But yeah, the gray man's there, and there's actually a lot of literature I've been reading ever since I saw the breaching and kind of got into that. And I wish I still had my bookmarked articles so I could name who was saying this. But they were talking about that most likely the majority of surfers who have surfed more than a couple times in Santa Cruz have been within, yards of a 10-foot white shark inside the kelp zone. The reason why I say inside the kelp zone very specifically is I always grew up in the Monterey Bay knowing that, or being told that if you were inside the kelp zone, between the kelp zone and the beach, you were technically in a safe zone from white sharks or possibly getting attacked or anything like that. For the record, from what I remember, last I've heard, no shark attacks within the city limits of Santa Cruz so far, ever. I hope we keep it that way.
Yeah.
Well, so that's my little shark bit.
Wait, hold on. Shark attacks or shark contacts? Because there's a ton of shark contacts that happen just down the road from where I live.
But is that the city limits of Santa Cruz?
Okay.
Oh, you're outside of Santa Cruz, technically.
Because I'm in Capitola.
I said the same thing. I was like, because when I heard that first, I was like, what do you mean? There's been attacks all around here. They're like, yeah, but not in the city limits. I don't know. I hope that never changes. I hope it stays that way. I just thought it was really weird.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of the people that are like for Danny, for example, people who are afraid of going out there because of the white shark, because of a white shark, drive over the 17 twice a day, all the time, for work, for school, for whatever. And the 17 kills way more people than white sharks regionally per year, and maims and permanently disables and like damages their lives. And yet people, like, I drive over it all the time, and I think the same thing in the same two spots. How is this a road, right? Like, how have they not come up with a way to make this safer? And whose idea was it to put two blind hairpins at the end of two long straightaways? Like, it's just, you know. So when you talk about going out there, there's the side of me that gets a little shiver down my spine because Joe's seen it happen before. I am a person who has spent most of my life in and around the ocean. And so I feel very keyed in. And there have been times where I've been like, there's something out here, and I've swam in and gotten out and said, we're done. I'm done. We're done. And we haven't seen anything. And I've gotten to the car and felt a little silly about it. But in my heart of hearts, I've felt something, or I've seen a shadow or something like that. And so when you hear stuff like this, it just kind of reaffirms that your spidey senses do tingle. You know, one time this happened to me down in Monterey. Joe knows this story. And there was a baby humpback that got stuck between the kelp line and the shoreline. And so I'm out there and I was sensing something was wrong. And then I get out and realize, you know, down the beach, there's a distraught baby humpback. That was a wild, wild day. Do you remember that, Joe?
I do remember that. Were
you here for that?
Nutty day. I don't think I was here, but I definitely had heard about it more than once from you about it. It sounded like it was quite the production.
Yeah, it was also really remarkable.
One little fun fact, I believe at one of our classes one time at Mullen Lake, Shep, that you talked about us just crossing the road between Mullen Lake and 26th Avenue surf spot, that technically that is deadlier than getting hit by a white shark in that same beach.
Oh yeah, way deadlier. And I think that it's easy to be afraid. And we live in a period of time where fear is very much a constant in our day-to-day lives. Staying physically active, staying outside, continuing to engage in recreational activities, I think that's staying alive. You know, I think that's as much a part of the process as anything else. I will also say, am I the only one that as soon as you saw that air jaws, I feel like I got a very clear picture of what the subsurface topography of that area is? I wonder if where that shark went airborne is where one of the steeper drop-offs is, because they only see airborne activity out of sharks close to shore when there's that type of like South African like cliff almost that runs up to the edge. Joe, are you thinking the same thing?
I checked it, and from what I could see through Google Maps and looking at the contours of the bottom based off of those maps, I guess they're based off of charts, it looks like there could be a little bit of a drop, but not just that. I think it's actually a canyon verge too. So you're getting a little bit of a draw or a valley going up that cliff as well. So it's not just like a sheer cliff. It's kind of funneling right into that spot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can pull some of that up and get some images of it for you.
And it's super hard because there are a lot of people out there who study sharks, and there are a lot of people out there who are very dedicated to this. And I have a lot of respect for what they do. And unfortunately, shark science is not funded in the same way that some of the other sciences are. And so a lot of the people doing a lot of the most important work are volunteers. And so they tend to get brushed aside by professionals. And I'm using really big air quotes right there. Guys like Sean Van Sundstrom, he is hands down dedicated to understanding sharks and understanding what sharks mean for ecosystems and why they're here. I think that as long as we have ambassadors like Sean out there who are able to verify and help explain certain types of sharks behavior, we'll continue to see people participate in underwater and subsurface recreation and surface recreation. The one caveat I want to put out there is that it's just a reminder. I've written about this on the blog before. We've talked about this on the show before. Every time you step outside your door, you assume a certain level of risk. you are exposed to viruses, you are exposed to drunk drivers, you are exposed to random crime, you are exposed to Murphy's Law. You know, Joe knows the story. 5 days before I did my swim, I was on a run with our buddy Adam, who is a helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps. And I stepped to the left and stepped off the curb, and a car almost hit me. A car missed me by less than a quarter of an inch and slammed into a car that was towing a boat 15 feet in front of us. And Adam said, he's like, that car missed you by less than an inch. He was like, that was completely insane. Sometimes you just have to accept the randomness of life and make sure to live life with both feet, you know?
Dude, Murphy's Law, dude. Look, I dislocated my shoulder yesterday skateboarding down the street.
Shit.
Man, your bike is like covering that and everything. I like thought I was tripping, thinking like maybe it's the shadowing or something.
No, dude.
I don't want to call you out. Damn,
it's tender.
Savage.
I was skating down like Portola, just like on a skate, you know, and like I don't know. This has happened before. I dislocated my shoulder on East Cliff before skating, but I was being like a dick and like weaving in and out of people and going a little too fast, and I ate shit in front of a lot of people. And then this time, last night, I ate shit in front of traffic. And like right when I fell, I was like, oh, my shoulder is out, and it hurts and it feels so gross, and I hate that feeling. And I got up, and this girl like pulled over, and she's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I just need my shoulder to get back. Like I was like gonna ask her to help me put it back in. But
have you ever seen Die Hard? I need you to grab my arm and twist just like in Die Hard.
But I was like, well, I can't do that because coronavirus. And she's like, do you need me to call someone? And I was like, no, I have my phone. I was like, thank you so much, but I'm okay. And then I'm in front of someone's house, and this guy's out front, and I'm like, I'm sorry to like scare you, whatever. Cause his face was like, cause I was like kind of cussing loudly. Cause it, you know, I ate shit. I have like road rash all on my back and stuff.
Oh,
big tree fall
that's
hard,
rough.
dude. Like
I was
hard.
kind of cussing. Smash cut to Danny out there, like
yelling, fuck,
channeling his inner sailor.
Yeah,
seriously.
talking like Shep and I, going berserk.
But I was
earning the
like,
E next to our podcast, that little expletive sign that we have there.
But then he asked me if I needed to call anybody. I was like, no, I just need my shoulder to get back. And I was like, maybe he can. He's like this old guy, and I was like, he probably knows how to pop shoulders back in. But then it just like, I like kept trying to twist it in, and it just like slid back in. I was like, oh, thank God.
Danny, can I just say this with love? Stop asking random strangers to put your shoulder back. If they don't know what they're doing, it's going to be so much worse.
Right.
Yes.
I know. Well, that's why I didn't ask anybody. I thought about asking people, but it hurts more than it has in the past.
Moral of the story is, what I hear is it's way safer to go swimming in the ocean.
Yeah, than skating.
It is to go skateboarding down Portola.
Water is sometimes more forgiving than pavement. Sometimes.
I've separated my shoulder a couple times surfing.
Yeah, see? So, you know.
Oh,
but I'm an idiot.
Danny,
I go way too hard.
Oh, I'm an idiot too. I need to tighten my trucks a little bit. I think that's what, because I'm too big and like I get speed wobble real quick.
What kind of trucks do you have?
Independent trucks. The only trucks that anyone should ever have.
But what size?
Oh, they're long. They're like the big boy. They're like super long.
Yeah. So I always preferred like the 138. I like the medium sized truck, not one that necessarily extended to the edges of the board, but it was a little bit inside. And then I just made it much stiffer on the bushing. Have you tried swapping out for custom bushings?
No, but I was thinking about getting larger bushings so I don't get like wheel bite or anything too. But I just need to tighten my trucks, honestly. Yeah. Just because I'm a heavier dude, like, and my trucks do go to the end of the board. It's like I have like a 9-inch board too. It's pretty big.
They're probably like 180s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just so you know, Danny, by the way, at 75 feet, water feels like concrete when you hit it flat.
Yeah.
At 30 feet.
Well, I knew 75 feet because I had to actually take a Marine to the hospital because he popped several ribs out because he fell wrong coming off the tower and did what he was told not to do, which was look down. And he face planted straight in, but he hit with his chest first, weirdly. And it like popped some ribs. It was weird.
But I mean, like, at least he didn't hit face first. His face could have been just pulverized, right?
Oh, his face was red from the slap. Trust me.
Yeah.
His face was not saved at all
Jesus.
by landing with the chest first.
It's like getting open hand slapped. Yeah.
His nose
I know
was
that
bleeding
it's
because
Go ahead,
water
Joe.
rushed up his nose so hard.
Oh, tickled his brain.
Yeah.
I opened up too early on a double front flip off a 3-meter back in college at Brown University. And the joke was that I hit so flat that the top of my ass cheeks didn't get wet. It's amazing how you just stop. It's like, oh.
It is crazy. It is legit.
All right. I got some sports news. I'm going to try and keep us moving along. My mom's going to be like, did you really have to tell that story to everybody in the world? Yes, I did.
Yes.
So,
yes, we did.
If you guys listened to the first episode of Capcast, which was originally released on SoundCloud, just came out on Wednesday on our main feed. If you subscribe to us through iTunes, if you subscribe to us through Spotify and you've been having trouble finding the episode, just search for the Coastal Athlete Program again and start following it again. You're going to have to start following us brand new, but all the same episodes will be there. So
the logo colors changed. So just look for the logo color change and you'll know it's the updated app.
The logo color has changed. Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about the colors?
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. There was a long time ago. It's the same outline and kind of design basically that we've had for a long time now. We have done a red and yellow theme. I'm going to have Shep remind me what exact single flag that is for the Navy.
Oscar.
I was going to say Oscar because I kind of remember by saying overboard. That's how I remember that flag.
That's exactly correct. That's the flag that you fly when there's a man overboard. Rescue swimmers like to say that that's the flag that means it's time to go to work.
Yes, definitely. And it's surrounded by a very deep blue, almost ultramarine blue.
Yep.
So it's quite interesting. Huh. So just one quick question. Are you like in an aquarium, Shep? Like, are you like in a bubble underwater? Because this light is killing me. I've been staring at it for a while.
I thought it was changing colors. Like you were like partying or something.
It is.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is slowly.
It's on like a color fade.
I thought the peyote was hitting me.
Oh no, that reminds me. We have to hit that story before we move on to sports. No, so basically part of my job at Cabrillo going forward is going to be to increase the quality of the streaming sports that we release. And that means trying to get us to that vaunted 1080p 60 frames per second benchmark. That's definitely where we want to be. The easiest way to do that, I'm finding, is to follow the streamer benchmark of using programs like OBS to kind of create these live streams from a direct camera feed. Part of that means OBS is like open broadcast software. So it's like an open source, like a Firefox, but for broadcasting, digital broadcasting.
Okay. Yeah.
So I ordered a couple of cheap wireless RGB light bulbs. And I've been playing around with using them to change backdrops, change colors, seeing what colors work. If you guys have watched any of our clips before, you guys have seen my California plaque with like the neon orange twine and some nails. This actually, certain colors make it like glow super green or purple or blue. It's really cool. It changes its color. So I've just been playing around with it, and I kind of figured, we got a new logo. We've got a new look. We're with a new host. We finally moved on from our old web host, so we can release as much content as we want. We don't have that hard cap. And I just thought embrace the rainbow, taste the rainbow,
I like it. I just want to make sure that the mushrooms weren't getting to me too much today. Got to eat my fungus.
I mean, I think they're legal in Santa Cruz now. That's what I've heard. Speaking of psychedelics, Joe, before we move on from your news segment, you have one story that I've heard is pretty pertinent to me and you. What's new in the world of psychedelic mental health?
There is a company startup out of Portland that has now officially come out and is going through trials of doing a psychedelic medication through nasal sprays. And I'm not talking just ketamine. I'm actually talking specifically mushrooms. And I believe that's the psilocybin in the mushrooms that has that effect on you. And what they're really targeting is for depression and PTSD, treatment in a sense, and it's not just combat veterans or certain groups. It's any of those, anyone that fits in the bill of a certain criteria of depression or PTSD. I want to say, you know, things that are more chronic or severe or probably will fill into that. So that's going to be an interesting thing to follow for a little while. GeekWire had that. I should have wrote down who actually wrote that one, but I'll be keeping tabs on that one for a little bit because I'm interested to see how that is going to change the way mental health is treated through pharmaceuticals. So yeah.
If this passed, is this something that we could see potentially be offered through the VA healthcare system, or would this be a service that we could sign up for and be reimbursed? Do you have any idea like what that could look like?
For this Portland company, we're not exactly sure yet, mainly because it's not FDA approved. There's legality issues of it, some different things like that. There is, however, a program in the VA that allows you to go to off-site doctors. And at least here in San Diego and in certain other parts of the country, they are doing ketamine treatments with outside providers that the VA actually pays for. You don't pay any of it. The catch with that is you got to have like 2 different VA doctors send you to this, whoever this clinician is, and they do all the treatment you got to do. So it will kind of take it to another step instead of doing something that's more synthetic to start going in theory to something that maybe is more natural, if you could say that, once it's been processed that heavily.
Is it me, or does it feel like it's become a lot easier to access alternative medical treatment through the VA in the last few years?
I saw a shift,
or at least since 2014 when I first got involved.
2010 is when I became a medical marijuana patient, and I was really surprised how receptive they were to me doing that and staying away from narcotics and stuff. So on top of that, I am interested to see that continue to expand. And I think a lot of what's driving that is the veterans themselves are really advocating for it. There's a lot of veteran groups that are really advocating for safe access to psychedelics for mental health treatment and do more research on it. Not just, hey, let's give veterans a bunch of mushrooms. It's like, hey, let's research this and figure out if this is a viable treatment. If it is, let's get it to the people who need it the most. So I think it's allowing the door to open more, because 10 years ago, I couldn't get chiropractic care at the VA or acupuncture. Now they will pay for that stuff and send me out in town to do that. So I think things are changing.
They paid for me to do EMDR, which is something that when I first got started and I brought up, they were not receptive to at all. You know, it does seem like there's become much more of an emphasis on getting veterans the care that they believe in than necessarily the care that they require. I felt like that was my initial impression when I first got into the VA healthcare system, was that if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, I had to do what they wanted me to do for 2 years before they would even consider that. And now it seems like they're more like, well, if you think it'll help you feel better, we'll give you a chance to try it.
Yeah, I think there's still a little bit of a waiting period with that, to kind of figure out if that is something that's needed. It's kind of like a last hope kind of thing for treatment for you, is what they're using for it now. So it's expanding. So Danny, have you heard much about psychedelics and mental health treatment in the last couple of years and how that's expanding lately?
I have heard in the past that some people are using psilocybin mushrooms to cure like debilitating migraines. And I have heard that it was being used for PTSD or depression patients. I didn't know that it was like so regulated. I thought it was like, you know, people like knew that this helped and they like found a dealer or something. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to help me, so I'm going to get these, you know, black market way. Like, I didn't know that it was so like you could actually get it from a doctor.
Kind of, not really yet officially.
Oh, you kind of not really. Okay.
Yeah, it's something where they're in the process of developing, knowing that they see the FDA possibly shifting to allow some of that to start happening. Now, from what I remember, recently Santa Cruz City proper itself is now decriminalized the possession of a certain amount of mushrooms with the psilocybin in them. So that has started opening up more doors. And I think there's actually a few other cities or towns throughout the nation that are doing it as well.
San Francisco too.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's weird because
Denver.
you can buy psilocybin mushroom growing kits online. Like, right, you can just go online and buy the growing kit.
Wait, you can?
No,
yeah.
There's one better. Beard Brothers the other day on their blog that they put out, because they're doing a lot of media stuff, they went over everything you need to go get from Home Depot for like $20 or $50 or something like that. Something stupid cheap. You don't even have to buy a kit. You can just go to Home Depot and get everything. But yeah, it's expanding. It's going quickly. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So maybe you should make sure to put that link in the show notes.
I think it's so weird that you can buy like kits, but you can't actually buy mushrooms.
But the thing about that scares me is that like you could buy spice too, and that shit was like straight up like toxic and will kill you.
Yeah.
And you could buy that stuff forever in like the back of magazines, and up until recently, it was legal to buy it like at a head shop.
Yeah. But they didn't advertise it as human consumption. It was like incense. So I think that was like their workaround for a little bit, but they realized high schoolers were buying it to smoke it instead of smoking weed for whatever reason.
And people in the military.
Yes, because for a long time, you wouldn't pop positive if you smoked spice in the military, as long as you didn't get caught actively being intoxicated.
I was on a ship that was involved in a spice sting.
Really?
I remember hearing about some of those.
That's like pounds of spice.
No, double-digit dudes got kicked out of the military for using on our deployment, and they were like using spice like during working hours, during watchstanding hours. Here's my ignorance. I saw it more than once. I saw it quite a few times, but like having grown up in California and spending summers in Massachusetts, it like to me it didn't click. It was like, look at these idiots like smoking incense. Like what a bunch of jackasses. Like, why wouldn't you just smoke weed? If you're gonna get in trouble, why wouldn't you just smoke weed?
Right.
But yeah, then like a bunch of dudes got in trouble, and JAG and NCIS got involved. It was a shit show.
And now the military can, from what I understand, can sometimes catch you through a urinalysis that you've taken spice within a certain amount of time. I'm the same thing with you, Shep. When I actually have all med, I've tried it once, and I would look at the person, I was like, why would I do this? Weed is way better.
Yeah.
So Shep, you were talking about you have some big news coming up going on.
Well, the biggest news in sports, at least from my perspective, because everybody knows that baseball is what the world revolves around for me. It is looking less and less like we're going to have a season in 2020. It looks like we're going to get one for the NBA. We're going to get one for the NHL. The NFL is going to get underway. Even the Bundesliga is back in action at this point. Unfortunately, Major League Baseball is getting further and further apart. At this point, the owners are trying to leverage public support to put pressure. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a call there. Owners are trying to leverage public support to put pressure on players. Players, as you guys might imagine, are not very receptive to that. And arguably the most powerful owner in the game, Scott Boras, has come out and said, do not allow the owners to get bailed out by your desire to see the game. I think it's really important to reiterate again, anybody who listened to Capcast that came out on Wednesday, that was a week-old take, so I apologize if it sounded a little stale. But here's my consistent take on this issue. If ownership attempts to ram something down the player's throat, it feels like that's going to be very similar to what we as a society may see from ownership as we reopen the country. So it could trigger some very negative and hostile responses, not just for the players union, but from the fans as well. Because I know that people want to see their team take the field, but do you really want to see a 24-year-old kid who's put everything on the line to get to this point potentially suffer a career-ending injury for 1/10 of what their value should have been because an ownership group didn't open their books? So I'm going to die on this hill. I side with the players in this. I think that until the owners are truly transparent about revenue, it is impossible for them to imply that a 50-50 revenue deal is in the player's interest. And the longer we go that this doesn't get settled, the more risk there is to every player to go out there and play. So it's looking like we won't see baseball this year.
I fully support the players. I'm with you, Danny. It sucks. I would love to see baseball. I want to prioritize the players' health and well-being, and that well-being for me means livelihood and income. And I believe that if the ownership is not going to share the actual numbers with the players to make sure everything is out there and everything will be fair for the rest of the season, I am all for backing the players and saying, yeah, I will support you. I want to see you on the field, but I can wait another year. And actually, one of the reasons I've been watching NASCAR lately is because they're able to socially distance, keep healthy. They don't even have fans there at all. And from what I understand, the drivers are still receiving their contracted salaries during the races and what they would normally get throughout the season. So like that, to me, that nothing changed. They just missed some races. For what I hear for baseball, they want to basically do new contracts for the rest of the year, which I look as could put the players in a bad position later down the line. So that's
well, the collective bargaining agreement is set to expire at the end of this season, whether this season gets played or not. And so what they're trying to do is essentially the owners are trying to work around a new CBA by instituting a policy that they could then either revoke or keep in place if it goes forward. You know what I mean? Like it when it comes to pro athletes in this, especially in the United States, these young people only have so many years that they can truly profit. And if you're a minor league player, like for example, yesterday, the A's are no longer sending their players $400 a week. All their minor league players were getting paid even though they weren't playing. That's stopped. So think about if you're a 20-something-year-old person who either finished school or didn't finish school, and you're really, really good at pitching, and now your checks have stopped coming. Those players may not be there when things start back up. Those kids may go to work for their parents. They may get a job at Home Depot. They may start doing something, slip a disc, and never be the same person again. And I know this because it happened to me. I got hurt, and my body has never been the same since. It's been better, it's been worse, but it's never been the same.
So, Shep, check this out.
Yeah.
So I have an extended family member. His batting average when he went to the Baseball Hall of Fame, I guess you can look up even minor league batting averages. His batting average was 408.
Jeez.
Lifetime minor league.
How many at bats?
A lot. To the point where the guy at the Hall of Fame looked at him and said, "Why'd you stop playing baseball?" And he said, "Well, we had a recession. Times got hard, and I wasn't getting paid enough, so I needed to go get paid." And fire service was very open for that. So it sounds like it can happen a lot, and I feel for those guys that.
And nobody boos you in the fire service. People don't scream at you when you have an off day like that.
Hopefully not.
I mean, the stakes are different.
They are a lot different.
And it's sad because, like, baseball's, I think the window has closed for them to capitalize on the lockdown in terms of having a captive audience, with NHL and the NBA being, really starting to get far down the road towards coming back, with Bundesliga coming back, with the Premiership coming back next week. Guys like me who were KBO was the only show in town. I'm already watching less and less KBO and spending more and more time watching Bundesliga. Joe is spending more time watching NASCAR. People are finding that the ratings are semi-comparable with a digital race to an actual race. Well, guess what? In an era where social distancing is super important, where we're talking about global warming, automobile racing has become less and less palatable. The idea that they're burning all these fossil fuels. It could be that we never see things the way they were before again. And if that's the case, I think the players in every professional league deserve a chance to restructure their bargaining agreement based upon the new reality. Because if you have a CBA that expires in 5 years and you don't have people coming through the gate for 5 years, there's no way those contracts can be honored. They just cannot be honored by the organizations. So it's a brave new world for media, sports, and everything like that. Speaking of which, we have just entered a really exciting new chapter. Nothing's been announced yet. This is purely me, your boy, speculating. Let's put that on a t-shirt. I'm calling it right now. The next big signing is going to be Pat McAfee and his crew. And it's going to be them signing some type of an exclusive deal with a platform other than YouTube. My guess is either Spotify or, honestly, I think Spotify is probably the only game in town at this point. He has proven that he has an audience. He has anywhere from 10 to 25,000 people watching his live shows. He has 2 of them, 6 days a week on YouTube. The dude has a tireless work ethic. He's willing to cover any sport. He knows how to have rapport with owners, general managers. He's a guy who does a really good job of bridging the gap. He's very savvy with technology and understanding how to lean into where the metrics tell you. At this point, the next wave of great young athletes that transition over to being sportscasters, the table is kind of open. I would argue baseball has Trevor Bauer. Football has Pat McAfee. I have no idea who the NHL has because I don't pay attention to the NHL. And as far as the NBA goes, they've been doing this through Instagram and YouTube for years. In fact, it's one of the reasons that they've grown as big as they have. As we move forward with sports, as we move into this brave new world in terms of a much more segmented niche market of people, guys like Pat McAfee are going to be way more resonant because they bring in me, they bring in Danny, and they can even bring in a guy like Joe potentially. And I say that because multiple times Danny and I have had conversations and one or the other of us has been watching Pat McAfee on YouTube at the same time that the other person has been watching Pat McAfee on YouTube. And Danny and I are not what you would call comparable sports fans, right? And I'm not saying that to be an insult, Danny, but Joe knows. And before I got married, ESPN was always on whenever he came over. It was ESPN or Fox News. I mean, like always. It was like background noise because that's like this omnipresent thing. Yep. Up. All right.
I got to step away.
Yep.
Have a good one. Sorry.
See you, Joe. Well, that looks like a good place to wrap it up. Before we let everybody go, I just want to remind everyone, if you're having trouble finding us, please, I mean, let's face it, if you're having trouble finding us, you're probably not listening to us right now. But in case you found us after losing us, thank you so much for putting in that extra effort. Today's episode will be available on YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Coastal Athlete Program on whatever your preferred podcasting app is. On behalf of Danny, Joe, myself, Posey, Tuck, and everybody here at the Coastal Athlete Program, stay safe, train today, survive tomorrow. We're out.